Would you like to go behind the scenes and see what the job of a winemaker really is like? How does such a physically demanding career, and I'd even say emotionally and mentally demanding career, impact family life? And what makes the Bordeaux region of Sassignac so special? Well, tonight you're going to get those tips and insider stories from our guest, whom I'll introduce momentarily. But if you are just tuning in to this video recording, please get into the comments and let me know, where are you logging in from? What's in your glass? What's the weather like? You've just joined one of the most passionate groups who gather every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern to talk to the most interesting people in the world of wine. My name is Natalie McLean, and I teach online food and wine pairing classes. So I'm live streaming this video for the first time on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, but it's based on a recorded conversation I had with our guest for my podcast, Unreserved Wine Talk. But I will be jumping into the comments. I will be here live with you, so to speak, in the comments. So get in there and let us know, what questions do you have? What stories or tips are you enjoying? I really want to hear from you. And before I introduce our guest, just let me say that 3 of you are going to win a copy of her terrific book, which we're going to talk about momentarily. All you have to do is email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com and let me know that you'd like to win a copy. I'll choose 3 people randomly from those who contact me. Back to our guest. Caro Feely is a writer, yoga teacher, wine educator, and organic farmer. She leads personalized wine tours, courses, walking tours, and yoga retreats near Bordeaux, France. She is a published author, speaker, and registered Yoga Alliance yoga teacher, a WSET wine educator, and a professional with many years of workshop, presentation, teaching, and management experience. She joins us now from her farm in Sassignac. Welcome, Caro. We're so glad you're here with us.
Thank you, Natalie. It's such a pleasure to meet you. As I said, I am just really, really delighted to be with you this evening.
Wonderful. It feels like we are at your kitchen table. Your reception is so good there.
Thank you.
All right. So the first question I have to ask, because you alluded to it, but you did not explain, how did Oprah Winfrey, the talk show host, influence you into following your dream to starting or buying a vineyard in France?
Well, it all started, Sean, my husband, and I, we had a dream to go wine farming. We thought very early on, when we met in Johannesburg in the early 90s, we had this, wow, wouldn't it be great to be wine growers? We were both really passionate about wine. His grandfather was a wine grower. I shared a house with the master of wine who ran the Cape Wine Academy in Johannesburg. And so we were both very passionate about wine, and it was like, wow, wouldn't it be great to be wine growers? And so we had this idea, but we were paying off student loans. It was so far out there was no way it was going to happen. So we kind of put it on the long finger. We got on with our lives. Work took us to Dublin. And it was in Dublin, sitting in our rented apartment, looking out over the Irish Sea with lashing rain and blowing gales, that I was reading Oprah's magazine, the O magazine. And I think my sister had given it to me or something. She lives in Canada. At the time, she was in Vancouver. And wow, we were in this magazine. It said, Oprah said, where do you want to be in 5 years? Write it down. Write down what your dream is of where you want to be in 5 years. Don't worry about how you're going to get there. Don't worry about what it's all about. Just put it out there. Dream the big dream. Because if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there. And I said to my husband,
Good
Sean,
advice.
we are going to do this. Let's sit down and do our 5-year dream. And he was like, that's chick stuff. I'm not doing that.
That sounds like man stuff response, but anyway.
Exactly. I twisted his arm, and we did. And when we swapped our one pages, they were both a dream to live on a vineyard in France.
Really? Both of you had the same dream?
The same dream. And even though we hadn't talked about it for a while, we had been visiting France every year, but we hadn't kind of concretized this idea. So it was amazing, actually. So two quite similar descriptions of on a small vineyard, making artisanal wines, organic, and also growing our own food, so a sustainable dream as well. So that was also something that was important, the self-sufficiency. And interestingly, so that five-year dream, we put it out there. It was such a long shot anyway, even then. And Sean's description was with 2 dogs I didn't have any kind of dogs in mind, but anyway, the vineyard dream was similar. And literally 5 years to the day, we moved to our farm in France with no dogs and 2 kids.
Oh, no dogs. Well, almost. At least you took the kids. You didn't leave the kids and get new dogs or something. But now that's quite a jump, because you were an IT professional. I'm not sure what Sean did, but why this desire to go make wine when it's so seemingly opposite, if you will, to a corporate IT job?
Yeah, so I was an IT strategy consultant and internet project manager, and that was pretty much what I did for about 10 years. And it was, I enjoyed it. I really did. I enjoyed my career very, very much. But we found that we both grew up in fairly rural environments, and we missed this connection to nature. And for Sean, he was a certified financial analyst working in a big bank asset management. And we felt like we were that we were missing out, and we also had this passion for wine. So while we looked at other opportunities, like maybe making cheese or doing some other kind of organic farming, really our passion was for wine. And when we looked at it, we were like, wow, if you're going to be a small farmer, it's going to be damn hard work. You better be doing what you're passionate about. And right. So it kind of was a no-brainer to go for the wine dream. But it did mean, leaving, coming to France, because really we couldn't do vineyards in Dublin. So we had to really just, burn the bridges and go, which is probably lucky, because we might have given up if we had the safety net. We might have said, wow, this really is too hard. Let's just go back to the safety of our corporate jobs.
Now, why did you choose Bordeaux and more specifically Saussignac? Maybe step back and tell us where these are on the map for those who aren't as familiar with the region.
Yes, so firstly, just to say, Saussignac is just outside Bordeaux. We are in the appellation, the greater appellation of Bergerac, which is part of Southwest Wines. But we are literally kind of 4 kilometers from the border with Bordeaux-Sainte-Foy. So if you picture France and you think of the western side of France coming down the west coast, not the Mediterranean part, but the west coast of the Atlantic. So Bordeaux is a couple of hours north of the Spanish border at that point, and so Bordeaux city. And if you go inland about an hour from Bordeaux, or a bit more than an hour with city traffic, you'll get to Saussignac. So we're a little further east than Saint-Emilion. So for people that have visited Bordeaux and maybe have been to the city and to Saint-Emilion, if you kept going east from Saint-Emilion for about another half an hour, 40 minutes, you would get to Saussignac.
And what makes Saussignac special? Why did you choose it, and what's distinctive about it?
So it actually was... we had this lovely long list of criteria that we wanted, and we had a very, very tiny budget. So in fact, this farm was the first one that met all our criteria and was a price we could afford. And
what criteria, for example, were you looking for?
So we're looking. We liked we liked the Bordeaux style of wines, like red and white. Actually, Sauvignon, from the Entre deux Mers. We love that style. the barrel aged, like Pessac-Yognon, of course the wonderful red wines, like a Saint-Emilion sort of style. So we really loved those kind of wines. So that was, I guess, it already fit that. But really the criteria were, we wanted it to be around 10 hectares of vines, so a good size for a couple to run, not too much so you'd need employees and too risky, and not too small to not be a going concern. We wanted it to be walking distance to a village with a school. We wanted it to be a single piece of land so that we had control over our borders, as in, you know, if you were 5 pieces of 2 hectares, and they were all surrounded by conventional wine growers, you would have much more pesticide exposure. So we wanted to, you know, have a single piece of land, and ideally with the buildings in the middle, and with old buildings that had potential to be renovated and to be a beautiful, I guess, venue as well. Although we didn't really think through the whole tourism thing right at the get-go, but that became something very important to us pretty quickly. So, and the huge plus then was that we're literally we're less than 5 minutes from a mainline trains, a train line that's a train station on the main line between Bordeaux and Sarlat. And that is huge plus, especially with people being more concerned about, you know, CO2 print and wanting to use trains instead of cars. And anyway, if you're having a few glasses of wine, much rather be training than driving. Sure. So it's such an advantage. We're so lucky. So many things, I guess, in there. And it just turned out to be this kind of miracle because we were so organic kind of in our mindset, but we didn't have a clue that Saussignac was very organic. And already back then, so when we bought the farm in 2005, France was only 1% organic and Saussignac was 10% organic.
Oh,
Today,
really?
France is nearly 20% organic and Saussignac is more than 50% organic.
Wow.
So we are so fortunate to be kind of in a place where the ethos is our kind of in tune with us, I guess.
Absolutely. And has there been any sort of transfer of skills or similarities between what you did in your corporate worlds, you and your husband, and applied to the winery? Now, there's the business of running the winery, which we'll get into, and probably it has IT needs as well. But was there any other skills that you thought, wow, I didn't expect this, but my skills from the corporate IT world are really applicable right now?
Yes, I think that, and actually one of the things that I did after being in IBM and Accenture was I started a business with people that were with me in IBM and Accenture doing early stage venture capital for software startups and consulting. And so I had been in a small business, and I think that was very fortunate that I had that stepping stone out of kind of the big company where I was managing projects to something where I had to kind of worry about a kind of wider picture, if you like, of the whole business. But definitely the most important one, I guess, is kind of entrepreneurship, being adaptable, coming up with new ideas at each point along the way. And, you know, we'll get into it with the different books and the different constraints, but it's kind of using, and I've used so many of those skills from setting up our website, selling online right from the get-go. 2005, we were already selling online. I think we're probably the only people in the whole of the Bergerac region selling online back then. So that was pretty dramatic. We really trailblazed into selling online to like our client base in Ireland, and we ship all over the world. So it's very important to us, actually, that direct selling. So that was absolutely, yes, us having internet knowledge, you know, having run internet projects, being able to do that was really great. I'd say the other thing is being able to be with groups, to facilitate, to talk about wine to large groups without kind of feeling, I guess, ill at ease. So the wine tourism part and managing groups, professionally delivering wine education and experiences. That definitely was helped by my years of running workshops, facilitation, that kind of thing, for sure, for sure.
And just while we're on that, so today people can come and take classes and tours and so on that I mentioned in your intro. Do you have a place where people can stay overnight as well?
Absolutely. So we have 2 accommodations, the wine lodge that sleeps 4 and the wine cottage that sleeps 2 to 3. And people can stay there for 3 nights or more. We don't do really short stays because it's just not, you don't get enough of a sense of place, I think, if you just, put your head down and disappear again. So we're encouraging a bit more of an immersive experience. And so yes, people can absolutely stay. In peak season, like over the summer, we do weekly rental because it's just too busy for me to try and manage the changeovers on different days. But for the kind of shoulder and the rest of the year, the short stays are possible. And when people come to learn about wine, what do I give them?
You've got a couple of books there. Thank you for having one of my books. Nice plug,
I love
Caro.
this book. It is
Red, White, and Drunk
so great. It's such a wonderful for people that want to just start to understand a bit more about wine. I love it. It's so entertaining.
Aww, thank you so much.
Really
this
great.
was not a paid ad. That was unexpected, but thank you. Okay, back to you. The process of purchasing your property, Chateau Au Garrigue, I don't know if you gave it that name. Did you give it that name, and how did you come up with it, or was it already named that?
So that was the old name. And actually, our friend in Ireland said, hey, why don't you call it your name, your family name? And he's quite a, skilled business person, and we should have listened to him because no one could say Au Garrigue, no one could spell Au Garrigue. In Ireland, everyone thought it was O, comma, like O'Grady or O'Brien. So Au Garrigue. So if I was on radio and I was talking about it, no one could, find us afterwards because they didn't know what we were, how to spell it. The French spelling, too complicated. So we changed it to our family name wisely, following many, many great estates like you find in Burgundy, and Feely. So Feely's our family name, and Feely is the chateau name now. Yeah,
Chateau Feely. Okay. So when you were first in the market trying to buy this property, there were a lot of false starts and complications. Tell us about the most surprising hurdle you had to overcome to just buy this piece of property.
Oh my gosh. This is exactly, you're hitting all the spots of Grape Expectations. I mean, that is the first few chapters are just like, how is this possible? Is this real? Am I dreaming? Is this hell sometimes?
What fresh hell is this? Yeah. What was the one that was hardest or most surprising or weirdest?
I think the weirdest has to be, and you might remember me mentioning this in the book, the 300-liter donation that we have to give to the previous owner, who owned it like 3 purchases back. So it was an old right that he had because he had distillation rights. And so he had the right to get 300 liters of our wine every year, just gratis, like free.
Sounds like a feudal lord or something taking his ties.
That was the funniest, like when our notaire said that, and we were kind of getting into the final signing, and suddenly this clause shows up. I'm like, what is this? Where does this even come from? And he was like, oh, yeah, you just got to sign it. There's nothing you can do. You got to wait till he dies, and then it's going to be over. Because that's...
That's incredible. So, wow. Do you still do that today? Or
yes.
Did he pass away? Oh, God. He's hanging on just for that wine.
But actually, we can give him the lees. It doesn't actually have to be good wine. Like, we can give him, lees, because it's for distillation. So it can be fruit or liters of wine. But obviously, for him, fruit's no good. He wants the wine. Yeah, but it can just be the lees.
The lees, well, you get what you don't have a lawyer checking for, I guess. And looking back, do you think all of these hurdles sort of prepared you for the realities of winemaking, or were they almost enough to make you throw up your hands and go, I'm not, we're not doing this?
Oh, there were definitely some moments there where I was like, wow, this is too crazy. And especially when, we were in the purchasing process and Sean came over to see the property and he arrived, luckily, by some kind of miracle. I had searched online for advisors about vineyards and I'd found somebody and called them and organized for them to meet Sean here to give us some advice about what they thought the vineyard was like. And it turned out that this guy was part of the government organization La Safeur, which actually, and they knew that the property was in liquidation, and we hadn't been told. The agent didn't know, the people hadn't owned up, and so that added a whole nother ball of wax. It was
so in liquidation, it was bankrupt, and
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did the owner even have a right to sell it to you, or was
well, they had the right, but they had to work with the liquidator, so they didn't have the only say. So it became a much more complicated situation because it had to be the Bergerac liquidator and them and Safeur agreeing to sell.
Wow, that was complicated.
Yeah. But it was in the end, it all worked out, and I'm so pleased we did. It's been an amazing journey.
Yeah, quite the journey. Now, your description of the AOC police, the appellation police, which are the people who enforce the wine regulations in France, really, and their tasting panels really reveals the subjective nature of, assessing wine quality. How have you handled that tension between, making wines you believe in versus what will pass official approvals, or even beyond that, what the market wants?
So, do you know, Natalie, now one of our key things is that we actually do almost all our wines under Vin de France, so that we don't have any of that those constraints, because we just found that so many of the rules were not about the quality of the wine. I mean, and I'll give you an example that isn't actually our example, but one that illustrates this so beautifully, is that there's a wine grower in Sancerre, and I can't think of his name just off the top of my head now, but he's really, really well known. His Sancerre is on 47 of the top 50 restaurants in the world, and he's really, amazing, organic, biodynamic winemaker. And he got kicked out of the AOC because he had weeds under his vines. And he handpicks. So it doesn't matter if there are weeds under the vines. When he handpicks, it's not like the machine where it might pick up weeds and then you've got weeds inside. Are you hearing me now? I just said there was a little...
Yeah, it cut out a little bit. So he had weeds under his vines. They kicked him out for that. He handpicks, but what was the issue? Why did they think weeds were going to interfere with the quality of the wine?
So if you machine pick, the machine will kind of suck up the weeds if they're growing up a little bit near, And so really that rule was completely irrelevant for him. And actually, I would much rather have some weeds than have weed kill, to be honest.
Sure. And there's more of a microcosm or microbial life if you've got some sort of plant life between the vines, I would assume.
Absolutely, and we hopefully can get into that. If not, we'll have to organize another chat, because I've got so much to say on that topic.
Biodynamics, But I can see why you went with the most open liberal classification of Vin de France, which just means basically a wine of France that doesn't have all these tangled red tape regulations. It's kind of what the Super Tuscans did too. They said, okay, we're not going to be in Italy, forget your DOC classification, we'll just be us. And they were just wine of Italy, and eventually, of course, they got their own appellation because they were selling for hundreds of dollars a bottle. But yeah, I can see that being quite frustration to deal with.
Absolutely. So we were totally like, this is, I mean, Sean, I think after a couple of years, he was already getting just sick of it all. Just, yeah, you're right, because it's just ridiculous red tape. And things that really, I don't think, you know, just to illustrate it, actually, even when it comes to, say, Grand Cru Classé in Saint-Emilion, Grand Cru Classé and Premier Grand Cru Classé, like in 2012, people got more points for having a parking for guests, like tour guests, than they got for being certified organic. So it's kind of a,
Wow.
it makes a point about it, and that's not an AOC as such as a classification, but it's just that, like it seems the focus is not in the right place to me if this is about wine quality.
That's bizarre. My goodness. Yeah. And sometimes people don't know where these things started, and do they still make sense today? And is
That's
someone
true.
creating a new rule based on an old rule, and then it got twisted? Anyway.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh my goodness. You probably remember the story where we're in the customs office and literally the people were arguing about our situation. There were about 5 customs specialists in the room arguing for about 2 hours about what to do about some minor thing. And I was just sitting there going, can you imagine the cost of all these heads here about something that really, I was just, but they have a book like this that they've got to, you know, follow, and they don't want to make a mistake. And those rules go back to the Roman times. Some of them are literally going back to Roman times. So no wonder they sometimes don't know what to do, because there's a ton of conflicting stuff in there, because there's just so much baggage, you know, the joys of the old world.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the weight of history is heavy. But let's talk about another challenge. That you talk about how physically demanding winemaking is. Can you give us an example of that? What surprised you specifically about just how physically demanding it is?
I think that it is very physically demanding in terms of the wine growing and the winemaking. Wine growing, you know, all that machinery, tractors, attaching things to the tractor, it's just incredibly physical work. Like Sean does it, I don't do it. I mean, I'll go out and do some handwork in the vineyard, but I don't do any of the kind of big, heavy tractor work. But it really is very, very heavy machinery. And the same thing in the winery. And even just hand picking, you know, we hand pick everything, and that in itself is a fairly active sport. And you know, removing the shoots at the base of the suckers at the base of the vine, even that, you know, that's a pretty big job.
Why are you removing the shoots at the base of the suckers? I'm just curious.
So the suckers at the base of the vine. So the vine has, you know, the main growth, I can only think of the French word now, but the
kind of like the
canes.
Yeah, the canes, okay.
So the canes, and it has a tendency also to send out shoots at the base that might be from the rootstock.
Okay.
And those shoots, we don't want them to grow because they're going to take energy away from, they're going to take nutrients and everything. We don't want them, so we're going to remove them, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's a pretty physical job. If you do it by hand, we now have a machine that does it, so it's much easier. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that sounds
But
hard.
just to come back to the physicality, I think as important as you know, it's very physical work, and even in winemaking, you know, just moving the pipes around, moving the equipment around, it's all kind of, you know, heavy stuff. But I think one of the other points that so many wine lovers don't realize, it's a very very dangerous thing. And in my book, I talk about how I go on a course for ravageurs and maladies, so pests and diseases in the vineyard. And that in itself is pretty scary. And luckily, we don't use, systemic pesticides, so that part of it was less scary. But the following day when we arrived, they gave us this innocent-looking little booklet that said evaluating risks. And inside it said, there are 4 killers of winemakers. Beware. Wow. 4 killers of winemakers.
Were wine critics one of them? Like a devastating scar. Sorry, I should not make light of this, but
or Trump tariffs.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. So what were the 4 in the booklet?
So it was the first one was asphyxiation by CO2. Now, that I think a lot of people would be aware of, because in the fermentation, CO2 is created. If you don't have a way for it to get out of the closed spaces, you're going to get asphyxiated. So that's very, very important, making sure you aerate. The second one is falling from height, particularly if you have been a little bit of CO2 has escaped and made you a little lightheaded. It hasn't completely asphyxiated you, but it could actually make you lightheaded enough to fall from, high on one of the tanks. The next one is machinery. So horrific things like falling into a harvest trailer or, there's just... Yeah, and all of these things, it sounds crazy, but all of these things have happened within a 5-kilometer radius of us since we've lived here.
Oh my goodness. Was there a 4th one?
There is a 4th one, electrocution.
Oh, electrocution.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So electrocution wasn't
like
actually a wine grower. That it has happened to somebody, but it wasn't a wine grower. But yeah, it's but electrocution, because you're working with liquids and high electricity. So if you don't have really good, that was one of the first big investments we made, was rewiring the winery, because that was just our lives were more important than that.
So you could have written a mystery thriller. There's so many ways to die in a winery. But now your husband, Sean, what happened with his finger? There was something there, an accident?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my goodness. Our first vendange, our first harvest, was a baptism of fire. And we had really, been working all hours, because we were learning, we were learning the ropes, and we didn't know how to do anything. So everything took way longer. Everything, it was completely all new to us. Even though we'd learned it in textbooks, we had never, done it ourselves. So that's a very, very different thing. And we were on the last day, we were picking our Cabernet. Well, the last day of machine harvest, we had picked the Cabernet. Back then, we were still machine harvesting some of the vineyards. And we'd picked the Cabernet, brought it in safely in the winery. We were breathing a sigh of relief. All the machine harvesting was finished for the year. And Sean came back round with the harvest trailer. He parked it up next to the house. It was still dark, because we'd pick very early, like 4 a.m., be finished by kind of 5:30, 6 o'clock, and it was still dark. And he said to himself, I should probably go in for coffee and just take a 5-minute break, but I'll just finish rinsing this trailer before I do. And he went round the back, and he went to take the lid off the back of the trailer. And in the dark, he couldn't see, and the lid was already off. And so as he went like this, his finger went into it got chopped off. Yeah.
It went into where, sorry?
So he went to take the cap off the base at the back of the harvest trailer. So the harvest trailer has a big auger inside, pushing everything out. And that auger is a chopper, basically. And so he went to take the cap off, forgetting that it had already come off, just because we'd been in so much. He thought it had been put back on or whatever. It didn't think, and isn't that the way all these stupid
especially when you're tired
happen?
Yeah.
And so he went to take the cap, and since there was no cap, his middle finger went up the auger, the little spout, and goodbye finger. So that was, as as our enologist said, thank goodness it didn't go into the wine.
Yeah, that would be.
So it went onto our land, making Sean truly part of our terroir. So
he has his finger on the pulse or something terrible. There's a terrible kind of thing going on there. Oh my goodness. Wow, that's incredible. And so, but beyond that, like, you know, so all these physical dangers, you write about that you had a mouse phobia despite the fact you're becoming a farmer. Tell us about the mouse phobia. Again, I don't mean to imply it's funny, but it's odd, you know, where you're placing yourself around, I would expect, a lot of mice.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. I really get scared of mice, and I don't know why. I can't help it. I
don't like them either.
I guess it's from when I was, you know, young. We had a few horses growing up, and as I said, we were in a rural environment, and you know there were rats in the stables sometimes for because they went for the horse feed, and I just so I never kind of got over that, and so when we arrived, crazy, there was like an infestation of mice, and oh my goodness, did we have to try every which way to get rid of the mice. Anyway, the good news is we now have an amazing cat called Maître Gimps, named after a French rapper. Mr. Gimps is uber hunter. They are, beware the mice is all I can say.
Well, game on. Now you also have a phobia of or a fear of snakes as well?
Yeah, no, I guess like everybody, you know, I've learned actually with the snakes to be a little more circumspect, because I know that there's only one kind that is very dangerous. Okay. And beware, because that one is so dangerous. It's the European viper, that if it bites you, you're dead in 20 minutes. Right. And Bergerac Hospital is about 25 minutes away. So you're probably...
So, enjoy the scenery while you can. Yeah. Wow.
So, but yeah, we have a lot of very... the only time I've seen a viper, and I'm not even sure it was a tiny one that got stuck when we were doing the building project, and you know maybe they were living here in the stones that are where the tasting room eventually was, and it was dead. But apparently there are viperines that actually look a bit like that as well and aren't so dangerous. But I'm not going to take any chances, you know.
So. No, of course not. But then again, you talked about becoming attached to your farm animals. Tell us about the chicken coop episode.
Oh, so the chicken coop episode, now I'm not sure which one you're referring to, but I'm going to tell the one that I like the most about the chickens.
Yes, please.
And that is that... so we have chickens for eggs, or we usually do. We don't at the moment because of the bird flu. The rules became much stricter, and there have been so many foxes around here, so we're kind of in a phase of not having them. But we love having chickens, and so and they all had names. They all are, you know, they become kind of like family. We'd let them walk around, have a lovely time. They kind of owned the place. They'd go in at night, and one day I had about 12, maybe 14 people here for the wine tour, the day wine tour. And so in the morning we go around the vineyard, and then we sit down, we do like a pairing platter. I explain wine and food pairing and all of that as part of it. And then in the afternoon we do a whole kind of, I guess, the winemaking part. And this big group of people, we've just served the lunch, everything is fantastic, everyone's having the greatest time, the wine glasses are filled. Well, won't you know, the head chicken, Pock, came in, jumped onto the table, did a lap of glory, knocking wine glasses and chaos, stomping in food, kicking red wine onto people. Oh my gosh. I was just like, what are we gonna do? I ran inside, opened the kitchen door, I was just like, Sean, that chicken is going in the pot. And our two daughters were sitting at the table and they both burst into tears. They were just like, we can't eat buck. Oh my God, it was so funny. Anyway, we what was amazing is that all these folks, they didn't know each other because, it's a group of maybe couples and friends that don't know each other before. But because some of them were staying in the gîtes, one of the ladies landed up with like red wine on her white dress. Oh. So one of the ladies in the gîte said, oh, I'll lend you a dress. And they went off and they rinsed the dress and they exchanged, contact details. They landed up meeting a couple of times that week then and stayed good friends. So wow.
Bonding over a chicken. Sure. And it didn't even have to end up in the pot. Pock. Well, you've just mentioned your daughters a couple times now. Your daughter, Sophia, if I understand correctly, had a life-threatening medical emergency just after birth. How did that experience shape your perspective on risk and influence and especially the decisions you made after that?
Yeah, so in fact, I've written a book about that as well. It's called Saving Sophia. So the one that we've been talking about the most today is Grape Expectations because it's the first in the Vineyard series. So that's just the little...
There's 4 books in the Vineyard series?
Exactly.
Okay.
The 4 books in the Vineyard series. But Saving Sophia is the one that's about Sophia and I guess you'd call it a medical drama. But how did that influence us? I think it definitely made us seize the day, This is life is here to be grabbed with both hands and, don't wait forever. And wow, it made us just so much more aware of how precious life is, I think, and how important it is to really do what makes you feel alive. And that was probably part of why we did what we did and we made the leap that we made. Yeah,
absolutely. Sure. It sounds like it. And yet you felt like a bad mom, you say, in the early years. Why did you feel like a bad mom?
I felt like a bad mom when our first harvest, and we had to get the girls to all these harvest machine and tractors and everything in the courtyard right outside our front door. And I was so worried that they'd walk out and, get crushed by something. So we'd make them get up, and we got this special walkie-talkie system. It's called talkie-walkie in French. It's amazing how sometimes French words, they just switch the English word to make it French, but it's called talkie-walkie in French. So we had the talkie-walkies. And we made them, it was rule that they did not go off the top step, step at the top of the double-story section of the house. So where their bedroom was, they were not allowed to leave the top step. They had to stay there until one of us came in to help them then come down and get their breakfast and whatnot. Because I guess, I kind of felt like I didn't have enough time for them. I didn't give them enough time. So through the books, there are moments where I do feel like the bad mom because I'm not giving them enough attention. But as I said to you, it's made them very independent young women who I'm extremely proud of.
And seeing their mother in action, living her dream and having a fulfilling career. What a great example.
Yeah. But I think the story I was particularly thinking of is one I talk about in Grape Expectations, which is when I was so busy and I didn't do the usual things that a mom with a crawling kind of she was crawling at the time, I think, or maybe just beginning to toddle. Would have made sure certain things were put out of reach and so on. And I just remember Sophia coming running through to the kitchen going, oh yeah, Ellie was teething. That's right, she was teething. So she must have been, nearly a year or something. And Sophia came running through to the kitchen. She's going, Ellie's got that, Ellie's got that. Like she knew that was not good, whatever it wasn't good. She didn't know what it was called. So Sophia had So I went running through, Ellie's got what? What's Ellie got? And I get there and she's chewing on the toilet brush. Oh my God.
She was teething.
I am officially the bad mom. I am so bad. This kid is going to be so sick. Well, she was totally fine. She was not sick. And she has such a strong immunity. Like, I don't know if it was... I'm not recommending making your kids do the toilet brush.
Maybe not the toilet brush, but they say kids should play in the dirt and eat dirt and all the rest of it for the natural bacteria, as you say. And you talk about how your daughters adapted to French culture and the language so quickly. You described that at their school, they were served sophisticated 3-course meals at school. So how has living in France changed your own approach to food and connection with wine and dining?
Oh, yeah. You know, I do love, like, France's kind of respect for food and for, I guess, taking time to enjoy your food and to sit down and have a proper lunch. Now, it's probably not that way in all the big cities now. I'm sure there are people that land up just grabbing a bite and racing back to their desk, but there's still definitely that tradition, and to the point where, you know, here I think everybody is kind of a gourmet in a way. It doesn't matter what you do. You could be a plumber and you still know about food and wine. You could be, you know, a teacher and you'll know about food and wine. You could be anything completely unrelated. Like, you don't have to be in the business or someone who's a particularly interested gourmet to really have this appreciation. And I think it does go back to it being in the school. So this idea of the 3-course lunch, I think, is a big player on that. So right from the get-go, when they're 2.5 and they start at school, so there's preschool as part of the school system. It's called École Maternelle, and they get the 3-course lunch at École
at 2.5?
Maternelle. So
what are they doing?
Yeah.
Apple juice tasting? What is going on there? 2.5-year-olds.
They get, you know, starter, main, dessert, and they'll get, you know, proper food, like something like an endive salad, so quite a bitter thing as a starter. They might get, you know, cordon bleu chicken or something for the main, and then they might get like a creme brulee for dessert. And so, like, Sophia already knew all these names of different kinds of, like a charlotte. What's a charlotte? I had no idea, but it's a kind of dessert. And she also, I remember we went and we had some radishes, and I had cut the radishes, I had removed the tops, and we were going to eat the little red radishes, and I was about to throw the tops of the radishes into the compost. And she said to me, no, Mummy, we can make a salad out of that. Wow. And she was like 5 years old. And I was like, oh. And she said, yes, and we'll make a vinaigrette for it.
Of course, like most 5-year-olds do. Yes,
isn't that amazing?
That is
great. At her school, then at that time, she'd moved to the next layer, which was like, you know, the start of proper school. But there, they had the 3-course lunch, but then they also had a very good initiative where 2 of the kids would go and help in the kitchen every day with the preparation of the lunch.
That's fantastic.
So they would, obviously not all the kids, just 2 of them, because they didn't want to manage a whole lot of them, but it meant that they opened their eyes to food preparation with, you know, a professional chef. I don't know if that was specific to that little school. It possibly was, but that was amazing. Yeah.
It is. And it's not just about snobbery or whatever, but they say if kids are involved in food prep and decisions, that they become more conscious of healthy eating. So, it's instead of the just fuel up and go mindlessness of, consumption, that just sounds marvelous. Really, really terrific.
Really amazing.
Yeah. Now, you also talk about the corridor of crisis in your home. What was that? What was the toilet brush in the corridor of crisis?
Exactly. Oh my goodness.
What else was there?
The corridor of crisis was something my dad quipped, because my folks actually live on Vancouver Island. They live in Qualicum Beach. And they were horrified at our decision to leave our kind of successful corporate careers and go into rural France in a very risky venture. Buying something in liquidation was a signal that this was not going to be easy. And so my dad was not for it at all. And when they first came to stay, and they weren't used to having young kids around either. And you know yourself, when you've got young kids, you cannot have a pristine house. You can't. No. It's just impossible. So it was a mess. There was, kids' toys, and Sean's a very tidy person, so he was probably trying to keep it tidy. But I'm a bit more of an artist, I guess. I leave a bit of a trail behind me, and then if I tidy up, I can't find anything. So. But anyway, so my dad called it the corridor of crisis, and it became kind of a bit of a humorous thing that we were living in the corridor of crisis.
Well, how old are your daughters today now?
So 20 and 22.
Oh, okay.
So Sophia is studying law. She is doing Irish law, French law, so she's doing
Fantastic.
like a double law degree. And so kind of international EU law.
Wow.
And Ellie is doing business, also kind of international, with quite a lot of mixed languages. They're both studying in Paris. Yeah.
Wonderful. Oh my goodness. So the corridor is quieter now, but
yes,
sure they return.
Exactly. Oh, it's so funny.
Now, what happened? I'm not even sure how to pronounce this, but it could be an offshoot of the corridor of crisis. But what was happening with the broyer toilet episodes?
Oh, that has been one that's come back and revisit us like the bad ghost. The bad ghost that
comes back to bite you on the butt.
Exactly. So in France, in these very old houses, our house is ancient. We've got a well that dates back to Gallo-Roman times. The wall in the underground cellar, the back wall, dates to the time of the monastery in Saussignac, so from around the 11th century. And the kind of main part of the double-story section, where said broyeur resides, is an old fortress house that has walls that are 70 centimeters thick, that obviously never had plumbing.
Oh, and what is a broyeur?
A broyeur is a grinder, like a grinder.
Okay.
So essentially the broyeur is put in place in any toilet facilities that are upstairs, and you don't have a normal kind of sewerage exit pipe in these old houses, and the walls are too thick and they're solid stone, so you can't really put one in. And so this is the solution. So this is a very French thing. So a lot of old houses have these. But of course, you can imagine that they can lead to great trauma and not very smelly situations.
Great and graphic
trauma. And the funniest one was actually really recently. Sophia had a bunch of friends over in the summer. Sean went off to Paris to her apartment, leaving me to handle, 8 20-year-olds partying for their summer party. And they were wonderful, really, really fabulous. And but one of her friends needed to plug in his phone, so he didn't realize the broyer system And he unplugged the broyer and he plugged his phone into where the broyer was. Only thing is, as soon as you do that, anything in that toilet is not going anywhere. So the next person to flush, it's all going to be coming right back out at you, and
nasty. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
So you can imagine how he got ragged. Oh my golly gosh. So ragged. Anyway, we solved it. I was worried it was broken, but it was just a minor thing, a little plug incident.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Let's see. At what point did you feel the business was becoming financially viable, that you could make a go of this, the winemaking?
So I would say, and just while I think of it, I'll give a little sense of the 4 books in the series and
sure.
the threads that go through them. So the first one, the Grape Expectations, is buying the farm, starting the organic certification, and realizing, oh my God, what have we done? This is a very, very tough business. How are we going to turn this around? How are we going to make this into a viable, sustainable entity? And book 2 is very much about that, how to make it into something that would be long-term sustainable. And I guess, like I was saying earlier, it's also about being kind of nimble on changing with circumstances, like even COVID. None of us foresaw that coming, and overnight all our wine tourism was kind of dead. But luckily we then, and this is also partly thanks to my experience in my previous life, we were able to turn it all into virtual, and we did a huge amount of virtual business. So lots and lots of team building and things like that around wine that were very, very successful for us. It actually landed up being a very successful time in the business. But just to give you the sense of the story, so Grape Expectations, first one, converting to organic, saving our skins, then going a little bit into biodynamics. And that one is also, and I said, ask me about saving our skins, because saving our skins was, the name is also part of the story, in that we were at that point of how are we going to turn this around? How are we actually going to make this? Because we were kind of on the cliff every month, like, are we going to make it? Are we going to make it? And part of what saved our skins was, yes, the wine tourism, and yes, being organic for sure helps. But also, we started to sell our waste grape skins to a business in the US that turned those waste grape skins into an antioxidant food supplement that people could take as a pill to stay young. This thing called Reservage was created by a very dynamic entrepreneur, Naomi Whittle. And they bought our skins for about 10 years. And that's quite a key feature in book 2, because she was a real dynamo, and she helped us to turn the story around. So it wasn't the only thing by any means. There were many other parts of expanding our way of going to market. So, we can't just sell to, say, a supermarket. That's never going to work for the scale that we are. We need to sell direct. How are we going to do that? So that's all, came up in book 2. And then book 3 was a bit more into natural winemaking. So that was...
the biodynamics.
I guess the next phase in the family story as well, girls growing up, menopause, dealing with menopause. So I called it Vineyard Confessions, Tales of Menopause, Love and Natural Wine, because those are kind of part of the story in that third one. But the last one, the number 4, is really about how we're dealing with climate change and how biodiversity helps us to do that, and things like trees in the vineyard. It's quite the most, I guess, exciting part of what we're doing now. So as a vineyard business, as a wine business, that is super, super important to us. Biodiversity is absolutely key. And I could talk about that subject for a lot of time. Yeah.
It does sound like we need to have a second conversation, but tell us some of the most interesting experiences, or surprising, or again, weird, or whatever, that you've had with biodynamics. Like, we know it's like organic plus, and it's really paying close attention to the vineyard and various preparations and bull's horns and all the rest of it. But maybe tell us an example or two of that stood out for you with the biodynamics.
Yeah, so it's a cow's horn rather than a bull's horn.
Oh, right,
it's definitely
right.
got to be a cow's horn, because it's about the fertility.
Yes.
And it needs to be a cow that's had at least 4 calves.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So you can count the rings on the horn to see if it's had, and it's about the fertility aspect of
Does it get
cow.
a ring, each baby? Does that create a ring on the horn?
Exactly, because of them lactating. It's taking away from the calcium that they use to create the horn, so it makes a different look to the horn than if a cow wasn't actually having babies. Yeah.
Interesting.
So
I think I have those rings, but anyway, I don't have horns yet. Anyway.
But yeah, we could definitely talk about that and biodiversity on another call, and I could have that as I could have the example of cow's horn with me, and the silica stone and all of that, so that we could go into that in more detail. I would say, I think so often biodynamics is just picked on as a woo-woo, isn't this, But really it's very much about listening to your land and being very present. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely about, I guess, just to give an overview for people that might not be familiar with it. Yes, biodynamics is organics plus. It's essentially 3 things. It's working with plant and animal-based sprays to help our vines to look after themselves, to be healthy, and to things like a stinging nettle spray that's a mild antifungal, the 500, which is the cow horn fertility spray, that's cow dung buried in a horn in a particular way to make it super charged in fertility. There's so much I could talk about on this, really, but just to make it as simple as possible. Yeah, so using plant and animal-based sprays to solve our problems, to keep the vineyard healthy. Using the biodynamic calendar, so that means that we follow a calendar that helps us to do things at the right moment. So it's very much about listening to what's going on in the sky. Now, we all notice the sun, of course, and we know that it has an impact on us, but all the other bodies in the sky also have an impact. I mean, lunatic comes from the fact that the moon does have an effect on us. Sure. And the final thing is to think of your farm as a whole farm system, as a living thing, to see it as a living thing where everything is connected. And this really works into the whole biodynamics thing as well, and the fact that, it's the mycorrhizae in the soil, the way that what's growing, the different plants, and what you'd call weeds, but they aren't weeds because they're all beneficial. Clove is nitrogen fixing. The grasses are making aeration in the soil. It's all a connected entity. We can't just look at the vine on its own like a unit of production. It just isn't like that. It is a living thing, and it is a vibrant, living environment. And I saw you mention bats on one of the other discussions, and wow, you know, bats are just amazing. So yeah, we have lots of bats as well, and they eat the grapeworm moth, and that's what we want, because we don't want grapeworm in our vineyards. So yeah, it's all connected. If you didn't have the trees and you didn't have the hedgerows, you wouldn't have the bats, and it's
And as a result, tell us about the wild orchids that are they growing in your backyard?
Yeah, and actually I have a little picture here of the orchids.
Beautiful. We'll put a link in the show notes to this. Yes.
So the orchids came back after 3 years of organic farming. So when we bought the farm, it was conventionally farmed, so 2005, and we started organic straight away. And in 2008, the wild orchids came back. And that is an indicator that the systemic fungicides had worked their way out of the soil, that our essentially our soil health was coming back. The mycorrhizae, particularly myco, as in fungal, rhizia, root. So it's it's an amazing symbiotic relationship between fungi and roots of plants and trees that helps them to extend their network, to get more nutrients, to exchange self-defense mechanisms. There's all sorts of benefits behind it. And lovely book to read if anyone's interested in more about this is Finding the Mother Tree. It's by a Canadian professor of environmental forestry. She's at UBC, and she is really was one of the first to do deep research into mycorrhizae and how they work. And so mycorrhizae, these guys will not grow if there are no mycorrhizae. And mycorrhizae will not be there if you're using systemic fungicides. So
there you go. Direct
it was
causal.
Amazing as an indicator. And we have so many now. It's just like a miracle. It's just they're so beautiful as well.
Yeah,
you know, there's one that looks like a beautiful little orchid with a bee inside. It's called a bee orchid. They're absolutely magnificent. Yeah.
Wow. My goodness. Okay, so wonderful stories and tips. Yes, we definitely have to have a follow-up to this, Caro. But let's jump to a bit of the lightning round quick questions. Maybe you could tell us about your favorite childhood food and how you'd pair it with wine today.
Do you know, I used to absolutely adore marmalade on toast. So I would have to go with marmalade on toast and Sauvignac dessert wine.
Oh, that sounds good. Yes, please.
That would be... Now, that's not something I would regularly have today,
Sure.
but that was definitely, as a kid, that was one of my favorite things, was a nice buttered toast with a good bit of marmalade. Oh, yum. Yeah,
yes,
and
please.
Sauvignac would be an aged Sauvignac that has lovely marmalade notes would be amazing. Yeah.
Great pairing. And who would you share a bottle with, living or dead, outside the wine industry? And which bottle would you open, and what would you ask them?
Oh, you know what? I am going to go with Al Gore because...
okay.
The
environmental aspect?
Yes, because I just spent a weekend in Paris with him running this conference, and wow, he is such a dynamo, such an interesting character, and he is a farmer actually. So
what does he farm?
I think is he in Nashville, somewhere near Nashville?
But is he just running a multi-purpose farm, like multiple crops?
I think it's his family farm that he inherited.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what... but amazingly, so this was all part of this thing called climate reality. That's a organization that he founded just after doing The Inconvenient Truth, like in 2006. And he's created this organization to try to help people to be more aware of climate crisis and what we can do to deal with it. And actually the French organization of it gave him this. It was his birthday on Monday. And they gave him one of my books as his birthday gift. And he promised to read it while he's back on his farm. So
excellent.
And he farms regeneratively. So it'll
That's
be interesting to hear from him what bottle would it would have to be wonderful, regenerative, organic, biodynamic. Well, listen, and what can I say? I would have to take a Feely bottle. It would have to be a Feely bottle.
It meets all that criteria. Yes, of course. And what would you ask him?
I think I would ask him what he, I guess, what he's found on his farm. Like, it would be interesting to hear his perspective on his farm.
Yeah.
I would also be interested in whether he is into wine, because I don't know if he is. So that would be very, very interesting. And I think I'd love to hear how, if he's feeling frustrated with how things have not moved as quickly as perhaps he would have liked. That said, I think that if it wasn't for people like him, we'd be even further back than where we are today. So when you look at the progress and some of the milestones achieved and you hear the stories, it was quite the most empowering 3 days, an incredible experience. And I think those are some of the questions I'd ask him. Yeah.
Fantastic. Caro, this has been a delight. Is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to mention?
Well, listen, I think we absolutely have to have another chat on biodiversity and biodynamics when I bring all my tools and I can explain the A to Z of how it all works. I really think that would be a lot of fun. If there's interest, if you think your audience are interested in knowing more. But
definitely.
Yeah. I think it's a misunderstood topic, and I think it's helpful to hear the facts about it as well.
Sure, especially from someone who's practicing it. So let's do that.
So, all I can say is it has been so much fun to be with you. I'm just blown away with the opportunity to have met you, and to have this chat. It's been so fun. Thank you.
Oh, Caro, thank you. And where can we find you, your wines, and your books online?
So the books are on Amazon. You can find them in other places as well, but definitely, for me as the author, it's best for me if you buy from Amazon, and it's the easiest probably for people. Definitely, I think in US, Canada, and UK,
everywhere.
EU.
Yes.
Yeah. Everywhere, and they're Grape Expectations actually on a pretty good deal for the ebook at the moment. So if people are interested, should jump in on that. That is one thing you could do, and then you can find me on carofeely.com. And you can find our winery, chateaufeely.com, so chateaufeely.com, and on social media, Instagram and Facebook as well. Same name, Chateau Feely. So feel with a Y, the Feely feeling is an easy way to remember it, the Feely feeling. And also French Wine Adventures, which is where we have some of the more wine education part of what we do. So and wine tours to like Saint-Emilion and places that aren't actually part of our farm. But for the farm, if people want to visit here, it can all be done on chateaufeely.com.
Wonderful, Caro. Oh, that's
And I would
marvelous.
be so delighted to welcome you, and of course any of your viewers, of your fans here to Chateau Feely with the greatest of pleasure. The Southwest France is wonderful. If you haven't visited before, and if you have, you probably know it is wonderful. So we'd love to see you here.
Well, I encourage everyone listening to do just that, Caro, and to start by by reading your wonderful books, because you are a writer. I knew when you asked the first question, you started describing the rain. I thought, oh, this is a writer. I love her description. So I'm sure they'll enjoy that experience with you in person or through print. So don't log off, but I will say goodbye for now, Carol, and good luck with everything. And I look forward to chatting again with you.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you.
All right,
Merci.
Cheers. Et vous aussi. All right, that was fantastic.